Have you ever considered that something as simple as a plant, silent and still, could hold the key to transforming the spiritual atmosphere of your entire home? This isn't a metaphor or the start of a legend. It's a quiet truth, spoken in the shadows of faith, passed between those who believed not just in miracles, but in the power of the invisible world brushing against the physical. There was a plant, a common plant by appearance. And yet, Padre Pio, Saint Pio of Pietrelcina, once whispered to a fellow friar, "Water it with holy water, and you will see what changes." No sermon, no grand explanation, just those words, laden with the weight of the unknown. Many who lived close to Padre Pio during his earthly life recall how he often saw things others didn't, not with imagination, but with spiritual clarity. He would speak of angels as if they were present in the room. He would know people's sins before they opened their mouths. He would speak of souls in purgatory as if they were knocking at his door. And so when he gave a quiet instruction to water a certain plant with holy water, it was not received as idle suggestion, but as a signpost to something deeper. The plant in question? The peace lily. You've probably seen it before. It's not rare. It grows in quiet corners of hospitals, churches, homes. It doesn't shout for attention. It simply is. Its white flower lifts like a silent prayer, and its deep green leaves stretch outward like open hands. But according to those who lived with Padre Pio, the peace lily wasn't just beautiful. It was responsive, sensitive, a vessel. One old friar, now gone to rest, once recounted the moment he first noticed it. He had been praying late into the evening in the hallway near Padre Pio's room. The air was heavy with incense, and outside the wind shook the olive trees. Inside, only candlelight moved. And yet he felt something different that night, a lightness, as if the sorrow in his chest had lifted just slightly. His gaze fell on the plant, the peace lily, and he noticed something strange, droplets of water on its leaves, though no one had watered it that day. He later asked Padre Pio about it. The Capuchin priest looked at him gently and said, "Everything that lives prays, especially that which is silent." He never gave a theological explanation. He didn't need to. For Padre Pio, faith was not a theory to be dissected. It was a flame to be followed. Others began to notice too. One brother who had struggled for years with spiritual oppression, darkness in dreams, a heaviness in his room, was told quietly by Padre Pio, "Bring the plant close to where you sleep, and don't forget the water." The brother obeyed. He said a simple prayer, sprinkled the plant with holy water, and that very night he slept without disturbance for the first time in years. No shadows, no weight on his chest, just rest. What was it about the peace lily? And why holy water? To understand, you have to remember how Padre Pio saw the world. To him, creation wasn't just biology. It was sacred architecture. Trees, flowers, stones, animals. They were all part of God's voice echoing through matter. And among these, plants, especially those that lived quietly, cleanly, and near places of prayer, seemed to draw in something, as if they absorbed the residue of spiritual presence, just like incense soaks into stone. The peace lily, with its pure white blossom and thirst for clean water, was like a chalice, not one made of gold or silver, but one grown from the earth itself. When touched with holy water, it didn't just receive moisture, it received a blessing, and perhaps, just perhaps, it carried that blessing outward. There are countless stories, mostly unspoken, shared in low voices between friars, nuns, and lay people, who had the courage to try what seemed too simple to be real. A mother with a rebellious child placed a peace lily near the family altar and began watering it with holy water every Sunday. Without knowing why, the child began to linger longer in that room. He became softer, less angry, more drawn to silence. Another man, tormented by doubts and confusion, began the same ritual. After a month, he noticed that his thoughts were clearer in that room where once they had been muddy. Skeptics would say it's coincidence or psychology, but for those who lived it, it was grace. A quiet grace, the kind that doesn't flash across the sky, but moves in the corners of your life. The kind that opens the window before the storm, that lights a candle before the dark sets in, and it always began the same way. A simple plant, a few drops of holy water, a prayer from the heart. Sometimes the plant would flourish in unusual ways, blooming out of season, growing faster than expected, or standing tall in places where other greenery failed. Other times the change wasn't in the plant, but in the people who lived around it. Attention lifted, arguments softened, dreams returned, peace arrived. It didn't require incense, chants, or ceremonies, just presence, just trust, and holy water, a symbol of the Church's most ancient power to sanctify and cleanse. Padre Pio never advertised this practice. He didn't write about it or preach it from the pulpit. He simply lived it. And when asked, he would smile and say, "The Lord hides his gifts in the smallest places." Perhaps, then, we have overlooked too many of those places. Perhaps in our search for signs and wonders, we've forgotten to look at what sits quietly in our homes, breathing the same air, reaching toward the same light. Perhaps the peace we crave isn't waiting for thunder and revelation, but for a few drops of blessed water on a green leaf, and a heart willing to believe that heaven often arrives without sound. Have you ever watered a plant and felt the room shift? Some say it's just a feeling, but maybe, if just maybe, it's the beginning of something more. The stories didn't start as miracles. They began as whispers. A grandmother in a small village outside Benevento noticed that every time she tended to her peace lily after Mass, sprinkling it with the leftover holy water she had brought home, her home seemed calmer. At first, she dismissed it. Perhaps it was the silence of old age settling in. Perhaps it was her own longing that painted peace where there was none. But then her daughter, who had been estranged for almost a year, came to visit, unannounced, unapologetic. Something had pulled her back, she said. They wept together, reconciled. The lily bloomed the next morning. She told no one at first. It felt too small to mention, too foolish to repeat. But she kept doing it, and each time she did, she felt less alone. She began saying her rosary beside the plant. Over time, it became her silent companion, and when her grandson moved in after losing his job and falling into despair, she passed the ritual on to him. Not with pressure, not with doctrine, just a gesture. "Water it with this," she said, handing him a small glass vial of holy water, "and say something kind, even if only in your heart." He laughed, but he did it. That same night, he slept without the recurring nightmare that had haunted him for months. Across the sea, in a quiet neighborhood in Argentina, a woman named Clara received a peace lily as a gift from a friend returning from a pilgrimage to San Giovanni Rotondo. The friend told her the story, half believing it herself, of Padre Pio's mysterious instruction. Clara had recently gone through a bitter divorce and was living alone for the first time in decades. Her apartment felt empty, even when sunlight filled the rooms. It wasn't just silence, it was absence. Absence of warmth, of meaning, of the sacred. She placed the plant near her bedside and began to water it every Sunday after watching the televised Mass. The first 2 weeks brought nothing. The third, she noticed the scent of the lily seemed stronger. On the 5th Sunday, she woke up in tears, not of sadness, but of something she hadn't felt in years: release. She couldn't explain it. It wasn't connected to a dream or a memory. It was simply freedom. As if a door inside her had opened and let the wind blow through. That same week, she wrote a letter to a friend she had once betrayed. She didn't expect forgiveness, but it came. And in the small vase of blessed water by her bed, the lily bloomed again. One cannot easily define what took place. It wasn't the plant itself that caused these things, not the molecules of the water, not some hidden chemical. It was something more subtle, more delicate. The intersection of faith, matter, and attention. Padre Pio once told a penitent, "God hides his light in little things so that we learn to lower our gaze. Only the humble see." And perhaps that is the secret. The peace lily, like many sacred things, does not announce itself with grandeur. It waits, it receives, and when treated with reverence, it reflects. The practice spread quietly. A few friars began sharing it with those who sought healing. not as a guaranteed solution, but as an invitation to participate in something contemplative. A young couple who had lost a child to illness began the ritual together, watering the peace lily on the child's birthday each month. It became a living memorial, but also a source of comfort. "We cannot touch our son," the mother wrote in her journal, "but we can touch something that drinks in our prayers." Elsewhere, a woman undergoing chemotherapy placed a peace lily near her prayer chair. Each time before a hospital visit, she would dip her fingers in holy water and press them gently to the plant's leaves. It was a wordless exchange. She said the plant helped her remember beauty, that it never judged her pain, never recoiled from her boldness, never asked her to be strong. It just stood there, alive, drinking in light, and, she believed, drinking in her offerings. Her final journal entry, written weeks before her passing, read simply, "The lily is still blooming." In monasteries, the practice became a private tradition. One friar in southern Italy wrote that during times of spiritual attack, those dry, oppressive days where prayer feels like pushing through smoke, he would stand near the peace lily in the chapel and breathe deeply. "It's not the scent," he said. "It's the memory of grace it holds." He spoke of moments when tears would come unexpectedly, without cause. Not from pain, but from encounter, the sense that something holy was near. And all this because of a whisper from Padre Pio. A simple instruction: water it with holy water. Skeptics, of course, would ask for evidence, for documentation, for controlled studies. But how can one measure the lifting of sorrow? How can you weigh the sense that a room once thick with tension now feels light? Can you record peace on a scale? Can you photograph the feeling of divine presence? Faith does not always come wrapped in thunder. Sometimes it arrives in leaves. Perhaps one of the most striking stories came from a man who had abandoned faith for nearly 2 decades. He had grown bitter, angry with the church, with God, with himself. But when his mother died, he inherited her home and her plants. Among them, a peace lily with a small bottle of holy water tucked beside it. Out of nostalgia, or perhaps guilt, he kept the routine she had practiced. Every Sunday, he watered it as she had done. One day, he found himself praying. He couldn't say why. He hadn't planned to. It just happened, like a whisper long buried suddenly surfacing. He found himself thanking God for his mother's life, for her patience, for the peace she had somehow preserved, even in her silence. That was the beginning of his return. There is no magic formula, no superstition, only the hidden invitation of grace through creation. Padre Pio understood that nature itself was a bridge, a sacramental echo. The lilies of the field, as Christ said, were clothed in glory beyond Solomon. And perhaps in this forgotten tradition, we are being called to remember that glory is still among us, in the shade of green, in the drop of water, in the heart turned toward heaven. So how does one begin? With reverence, with faith, and with trust that the simplest acts, when done in the presence of the sacred, become vessels of the divine. The plant must be placed in a space of silence, a corner of prayer. To a place where distractions are few and intentions are real. The holy water used must be blessed with the prayer of the Church, not as a superstition, but as a sacrament, and the watering must be gentle, contemplative, accompanied by prayer or simple offering. No formulas required, just a heart that believes God sees what is hidden. Over time, something begins to unfold. Sometimes it's in the plant, how it blooms, how it radiates. But more often, it's in the room, in the people. In the subtle change of spiritual temperature, what once felt heavy becomes breathable. What once echoed with sorrow begins to hum with quiet joy. And always, it begins the same way. A hand reaching for holy water, a drop touching the soil, a whisper of prayer rising like incense from the leaf. You may not feel it the first time, or the second, but grace is not a performance, it is a presence, and sometimes it arrives slowly, like dew. Is it the plant, the water, the prayer? Perhaps it is the union of them all. Perhaps heaven only needs a small window to pour itself into the world. And perhaps, in that corner of your home, where a peace lily lifts its white blossom, Heaven is already leaning in. If you are reading this and wondering whether something so small, so humble as a plant could truly become a vessel of peace, let me say this: you are not alone in your doubt. And yet perhaps it is precisely in the smallest things that the divine prefers to hide. Padre Pio, whose life was filled with visions, sufferings, and miracles, never sought the spectacular. He once said, "The more humble the soul, the more grace it receives." And maybe the same can be said for the spaces we live in. The more quietly we sanctify them, the more they receive. To begin this spiritual practice is not to expect fireworks or overnight wonders. It is not a charm nor a superstition. It is an act of devotion, a sign that you are willing to invite grace into the ordinary, that you are willing to bless what has gone unnoticed, that you believe God speaks not only from burning bushes, but from silent petals as well. Start by choosing a peace lily, not for its beauty, but for its silence. Its name already speaks volumes. Peace. It does not crave attention. It does not bloom constantly. It waits. It endures. It listens. Choose one and bring it into your home, not as a decoration, but as a companion. Find a place of stillness, a corner where you pray, reflect, or simply sit in quiet. That is where the lily belongs, where the distractions of the world fade just enough to let the spirit breathe. You will need holy water, blessed ideally by a priest. Keep it nearby in a small bottle or a sacred vessel, once a week, on Sunday, or on any day that carries weight in your heart. Pause. Approach the lily as you would approach a relic, with reverence, with slowness, with trust. Dip your fingers in the holy water and sprinkle it gently on the leaves and the soil. As you do, say a simple prayer. You don't need anything elaborate. Words from your heart are enough. Perhaps a Hail Mary, perhaps a plea, perhaps just a breath. The key is intention. You are not watering a plant. You are participating in a mystery. You are inviting the light of Christ into your home through creation. You are placing your faith into something that grows, that breathes, that receives and reflects. Over time, as you repeat this, you may begin to notice things, subtle, almost imperceptible shifts, a tension released, a heaviness that lifts for no reason, a return of dreams you had forgotten, a new stillness in your prayer, or perhaps the plant itself responds, standing taller, blooming longer, exuding a fragrance you hadn't noticed before. These are not proofs, they are signs, echoes, but perhaps the greatest transformation will not be in the plant or in the room, but in you. Your heart may become softer, your listening deeper, your gaze more attuned to the sacred. You may find yourself drawn more often to silence, to reflection, to gratitude. And isn't that the true miracle? Padre Pio never claimed to control miracles. He simply opened himself to them. He invited them, and he allowed the divine to act where it willed. This practice is just that, an invitation, an offering, a small act of obedience that creates space for God to move. Do not rush it. Do not measure its success by outward results. Simply continue. Continue watering the lily. Continue praying. Continue believing that grace can move through the least expected places. And as you do, remember that you are part of a quiet lineage now, a spiritual chain of souls who chose to sanctify their homes not with noise, but with faith, who believed that holiness could dwell in the everyday, that even a green leaf touched by blessed water could become a tabernacle of peace. Perhaps one day, years from now, someone will sit beside your lily and feel what you felt, a calm that cannot be explained, a stirring of joy, a memory of something eternal. And they too will pick up the water and whisper a prayer, and the rhythm will continue. Because heaven moves in circles, not in straight lines, and every circle begins with one motion, one drop, one prayer, one plant. So let it begin with you. Let your home become not just a place to live, but a place where God dwells, not through lightning, but through leaves. And when you water that peace lily next, know that you are not alone. Padre Pio is still whispering in the silence, and heaven is listening. If this story touched something in your heart, I invite you now to like this video, subscribe to the channel for more contemplative stories and spiritual reflections, and leave a comment below. Tell us if you've ever felt the presence of peace in unexpected places, or if there's a quiet ritual that helps you feel closer to God. Your story might be the sign someone else is waiting for.